All right, today we are diving deep into a really powerful, and I mean scathing critique of what our source material calls a calculated assassination of cosmic order. We're not just talking about a simple fall from grace here. This is an indictment, a prosecution of the ultimate betrayal.
And right away, the core thesis is just laid bare. The fall of these celestial guardians, the Watchers, this wasn't some kind of oops, some unavoidable tragedy. No, the argument being made is that this was a deliberate, premeditated crime against the very fabric of the universe.
So, who exactly were these Watchers? Well, imagine these beings of just immense power. They're called the Bright Keepers, and they were given one single sacred job: watch over humanity. But here's the key part. They were supposed to do it from a distance, from a place of separation and superiority. Their whole reason for being was that vigilant, detached watch.
Okay, so the argument kicks off by framing this whole event not as a moment of weakness, but as a deliberate act. An act of what it calls cosmic cowardice.
I mean, just look at this comparison. It really captures the sheer scale of the downgrade. They had the pure silver light of the eternal, and they traded it for, and I love this phrasing, the mud-caked warmth of the valley. They went from being beings of eternity to basically tourists in the realm of the dying. It was the ultimate act of spiritual surrender.
And this is where the case really starts to build, because they didn't just abandon their posts. Oh no, they basically looted the celestial armory on their way down, and in the process, they turned divine gifts into weapons.
And this slide just illustrates that process perfectly. You see, they had access to the flame of truth, this pure guiding light. But when they brought it down to earth, its entire purpose got twisted. It went from selfless guidance to selfish utility. It became what's called the forge of ambition, a consuming fire they used to get power and influence over mortals.
And we're not talking about some abstract corruption here. The sources are incredibly specific. You have Azazel teaching the arts of war, how to make swords and shields. Others taught the arts of vanity, cosmetics, dyes, all that. And their leader, Samuzah, taught sorcery. You see? They weren't bringing enlightenment. They were handing out shortcuts to self-destruction.
This quote just perfectly captures the disaster, doesn't it? By giving humanity all this incredible power, but none of the wisdom to control it, they guaranteed chaos. They introduced mechanized slaughter to a world that was just not ready for it. So this brings us to what you might call Exhibit A, the most damning piece of physical evidence in this cosmic trial, the monstrous offspring that came from their crimes. The Nephilim. Now, it's so important to get this right. They weren't just giants. No, they were living, breathing violations of cosmic law. They were the physical proof of what happens when the sacred and the profane are forced together.
And it's fascinating to see how different allegories describe their nature. In one, they're called giants of greed, who literally eat all the food in the valley. In another, they're giant texts that just chaotically consume all other knowledge. But what's the common thread? They are, by their very nature, a consumptive, destructive force.
So ultimately, that's what they represent. They are the nightmare that's born when you mix light and clay. The ultimate proof that forcing the sacred into the profane always, always ends in a monstrosity. So after all this chaos, we finally get to the last phase, the judgment. This is the moment of what the text calls the divine accounting.
And you won't believe this. After everything they did, they had the audacity to beg for mercy. But the verdict was just absolute. You were eternal. You had no need of the dust. In other words, there was zero excuse for their choice. Being immortal meant they had no need for the fleeting, messy things of earth.
And now look at this. The justice handed down is just perfectly symmetrical. The punishment literally mirrors the crime. The Bright Keepers, who taught humanity how to forge iron for ambition, are now bound in that exact same iron. Azazel, who taught vanity and led humanity into darkness, is cast into an abyss of, you guessed it, darkness.
So their once privileged position, that high and mighty place of observation, gets twisted into their eternal prison. The very height they used to look down from has now become their celestial cage.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Let's talk about the lasting scars of this betrayal, the moral of this very, very dark story.
Well, the legacy is really twofold. First, it gives us a kind of theological origin story for evil spirits, which are said to be the disembodied souls of the Nephilim, now trapped on Earth to cause trouble.
And second, it serves as this timeless warning to any power in any time that abandons its secret duty for selfish gain.
And here it is, the moral bottom line. And what a powerful metaphor. Light without duty is a fire that eventually consumes the lamp. Think about that. Power, truth, knowledge, if you don't have the responsibility to wield them correctly, they will inevitably destroy you.
Which leaves us with this final, chilling question. Sure, this is an ancient story, but its warning is absolutely eternal. It's asking us to consider, for any power structure at any time, when that power abandons its sacred duty and forgets its purpose, what new monsters are we allowing to wait in the dark?